Okay, right, let's make a start. So this is a response to the Tempest question 1, the extract question. Can you see it clear enough on the screen? Okay, start broadly, deal with Act 5. Some of you are very good at this. You talked about how Act 5 in comedies conventionally will talk about the restoration of order. We will talk about the restoration of identity. So you neatly outline that. A very good answer will then explore how this extract does that. Okay, as we're looking at the use of language, we're also looking at its dramatic effects. So what we're looking at there is AO2, the effects of language, the use of form, comedy form, or the romance form, and the use of structure, what patterns you can see in the extracts. Okay, the most successful answers came straight in with a couple of things. Prospero in his magic robes. So again, the use of stagecraft is important. Okay, he's in magic robes again. Clothes in Shakespeare symbolize power. Okay, stage directions. You should be dealing with that because this is a play, so you're dealing with the form of the play. Okay, you might mention Prospero's cell, and that introduces the theme, perhaps, of entrapment that is carried forward with the language. Okay. Some people talked about the beginning of the extract, my charms crack not, my spirits obey, and time goes upright. Again, the use of triplets by Prospero is echoed at the end. I think Tatum, you said this at the end of his soliloquy, where he talks about his triplets. I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth and deeper than did plummet sound. Very good answers. Talk about how the beginning of the extract perhaps relates to the end of the extract. You're looking at the structure of the passage as a whole. So the beginning is very much about Prospero's power. Okay, his charms are powerful. My spirits obey. Time goes upright. How's the day? Okay, so he's giving commands, power, looking for patterns. The best students will find patterns in the text. On the 6th hour, at which time, my lord, you said our work should cease. I'm always reminded by this of what happens after the 6th day, and on the 7th day they did rest. Okay, you know, it reminds us perhaps of the story of Genesis, and again the idea of Prospero as Lord, as God. You said our work would cease. Ariel hasn't given up. Is their desire. I should use the indefinite pronoun, possessive adjective. I'll get onto that. And so very good answers here would talk about how Ariel's desire is reflected in Ariel's language. Ariel is trying to persuade Prospero, and so uses rhetorical techniques to persuade Prospero. Some of you kind of glossed over this exchange a little bit, and so you might think about that. On the 6th hour, my lord. Okay, I'm going to talk about the use of my. That is a possessive adjective. This is how you spell possessive. Okay, it's not a pronoun because it's describing the noun. The noun is Lord. Mine is a possessive pronoun. Okay, my is used a lot. Many students commented about the patterns. Ariel talks about my lord, Prospero talks about my Ariel, and the use of possessions, you could talk about that. You said our work should cease. I did say so. Many of you commented on the use of latched verse, the idea that Prospero finishes Ariel's line and Ariel finishes Prospero's line as a degree of intimacy in them. One student said something very interesting about that the latched verse almost echoes the sense of Ariel being entrapped by Prospero. He speaks within Prospero's framework. That was an interesting idea. It might have been Francesca might have used that one, I think. So that was interesting. The idea that iambic pentameter, the latch verse, shows how he's trapped. Other people talked equally validly about how there's a degree of intimacy, how Ariel is perhaps an element of Prospero, and that closeness that they have. And maybe you can talk outside of the extract, how it also reminds us of Caliban and Prospero talking, but again, theirs is more of a kind of anger, finishing off each other's language. Or indeed, Miranda. So you can reflect outside of the extract to make sense of what's inside the extract. The best students will do that. Okay. Again, so say my spirit, how fares the king and his followers? My spirit, that possession is there in the extract. They are confined together. Ariel, some students talked about this is where they got patterns. I think Maya, you picked up on the patterning here, the patterning of entrapment, and many students did that. So we've got words to do with entrapment. Confined is a verb. Prisoners, which is a noun. Okay, they cannot budge. Okay, till your release. Again, so that sense of looking for patterns in the language is always kind of sophisticated use of structure and language. Why is he doing this? Well, because he's trying to persuade Prospero to release himself as well, to release Ariel. Okay. Some students talked about the dramatic effect of this. The king, his brother, and yours abide, all three distracted. The remainder are mourning, brimful of sorrow and dismay. Again, brimful of sorrow they are. That's a metaphor. You should be looking for some of these techniques that are used. I think, Anna Louise, you might have mentioned this. Again, why is Ariel using rhetorical techniques of metaphor to describe their sadness? I think, Rebecca, you did the same. Again, it's metaphor is a rhetorical technique. The subtext here, remember subtext? Is a 1960 song by Engelbert Humperdinck. It's called Release Me. Please release me, let me go. Okay, the subtext that he's not saying himself is I want to be released. So his rhetorical techniques are doing that. Okay, so they're distracted, they're mourning, they're full of sorrow and dismay. So this pattern of words, again, perhaps makes us question Prospero. The audience now question Prospero. Thinking about the audience response is a very good way of is tackling the dramatic effects. Okay, we're starting to see Prospero as a tyrant. He's making them distracted. He's making them mad, and him chiefly you termed, sir, the good Lord Gonzalo. Notice the use of honorifics, titles, sir, respect. It's persuasive as well. Gonzalo, his tears run down his beard like winter's drops. Now, some students really tackled that simile, you know. And again, you need to identify these techniques because it's AO1. The simile, it's a nature simile like winter's drops. Why winter? Because it's cold. It makes Prospero seem quite harsh. Well done, the person who tackled that simile, the effect of that. Or the nature simile. Again, the idea of what Prospero is doing is by turns unnatural. Well done, Jay, for saying that point. That was like a kind of interesting idea. Okay, so if you don't tackle these things, you're not saying as much as other students. So your charms strongly works them that if you now beheld them, the conditional, if you beheld them, your affections would become tender. If and would. Well done. I think, Francesca, I'm talking about the use of tentative language. If, would, perhaps, you would become tender. Again, Prospero's not sure how to react to this, so Prospero asks a question. This is the start of Prospero reducing his power. Up until now, he's given commands. Remember, it's about obey. What's the time? Release them, confine them. But now he's asking a question. Dost thou think so, spirit? What would you say about thou? What's thou a sign of, Rebecca? I can't remember. That's why I got on the chair and off the chair. Tell me. Who can remind me? What is thou? Someone talking down, isn't it? So, dost thou think so, spirit? He's still in charge, in power, but he's questioning. Mine would, sir, were I human. Again, the tentative language. The use of latched verse there, okay, is area or part of him. Mine would, sir, were I human. Okay, his use of tentative language is because he's not challenging Prospero. It's a persuasive element. He doesn't say you're wrong. He's just saying mine would, sir, were I human. And mine shall. Again. And again, it's a future tense, shall. He's not quite there yet, Prospero, is he? Okay. Now, this is a moment of shift. Okay. Tracking where in the passage shifts from one thing to another. Okay. Mine shall. Hast thou but air, a touch, a feeling? Again, the use of triplets. Of their afflictions, and shall not myself, one of their kind, that relish as sharply as passion as they, be kindlier moved than thou art. Prospero is asking himself a rhetorical question here. He's saying, I'm human and I feel everything human, and yet you feel more human than me. Well, then should I not be more human myself? Okay, that's quite a long, complex antithesis sentence. Well done to the people talking about the use of caesura, breaking up the line. Okay. The use of oppositions, breaking up the line. Prospero is in conflict. So he's not come to a conclusion here, he's in conflict. Hence, he's asking questions. Okay, so we've got oppositions, afflictions, passions. Okay, to relish things sharply, to feel things sharply. But then he's talking about being kindlier. Okay. He's talking about the opposition of being someone who's air, but he's human. So there's a number of oppositions in there. And he ends with a question. What am I? What shall I do? So though with their high wrongs, I am struck to the quick. Prospero is still full of passion and revenge. So even though I am struck to the quick, his anger is still there, even though I'm still angry, yet with my nobler reason, against my fury, I do take the part. The rarer action is virtue than vengeance. Well done to the students who broke that up. Well done who talked about the use of antithesis there, the use of opposition, reason against fury, okay, virtue against vengeance. And it's all broken up by caesura again. So in some ways, Prospero's conflict is reflected in his language of caesura, of antithesis, and oppositions. So you have to show how the language reflects the dramatic effects. And then he says, again, another caesura, they being penitent, it is the sole drift of my purpose, does not extend a frown. But that wasn't his purpose earlier in the text. Earlier in the text, he's saying, my projects gathers to a head, my charms obey, my spirits crack not, my charms crack not. But now he's saying, oh, well, now they're penitent, that's it. And again, do we see him as the religious God bringing people to forgiveness. He doesn't want them to frown anymore. He's going. So at the end of it, this is where we've got his change. His well done to the people who talked about epiphany, seeing the world in a new way. Go release them, Ariel. My charms are break, their senses are restore, they shall be themselves. Well done to the people who talked about restoration of comedy showing itself here. Okay, well done. Well done, Tatum, for talking about how the end of that line, our break, our restore, they shall be themselves, kind of contradicts charms cracking not, spirits obeying, and abeyance. So he's gone from the top of the lines here, a triplet, and at the end it's about restoring, being themselves. Okay, so you had to talk about AO2 at that point and how this shows itself as a comedy. You couldn't just mention it at the beginning of the act. You had to show it within the language. Okay, good. Now, it's important to consider our fetch them, sir, still given his honorifics, the aerial exits, okay, the stage craft. What kind of text is this? This is a play, it's an exit. Prospero's now got soliloquy. Or a monologue. There's two ways of seeing this. He's addressing the invisible elves of the forest, or it's a monologue. I see it's a soliloquy in effect. Well done to the students who talked about Prospero and Louise on stage, Faith as well. He's on stage alone. Well done, Max. He's vulnerable. Okay. So the proxemics. Did you mention proxemics? The use of space on stage is important here. Let's get rid of that. So Errol leaves. So now Prospero has had an epiphany. We have to consider what soliloquies do, don't we? They reveal in Act 5 perhaps a new way of seeing the world, a new way of seeing oneself. Soliloquies can also be about conflict and resolution. And so you have to address the soliloquy a little bit more than some of you did. Okay? And I think there's two parts to this. He addresses the supernatural element of this island. So look at the supernatural element. The elves that go on the sands with printless foot. They float around. That do chase the ebbing Neptune. Again, metaphors of ebbing and tides. It's all supernatural. The use of gods here I'm going to come forward and back to. Okay? You demi-puppets that by moonshine do the green sour ringlets make, whereof the ewe not bites, and whose pastime is to make midnight mushrooms. Again, Prospero is kind of mimicking in some ways whose love of the island, Max? Maybe. Now, he who loves the island perhaps becomes a better person for it. So, mimicking Caliban's love of the island, he sees the island in a very supernatural way, full of elves and fairies, okay, with moonshine and midnight mushrooms, demi-puppets. So think about this kind of supernatural element, for instance. Now, this is one big soliloquy, so it needs perhaps breaking down and looking at where there's shifts in it. And to hear the solemn curfew. Okay, so maybe he's talking about what he can hear on this island. This island is an island of strange sounds. What does Caliban say about the island, Joey? Yes, the sweet airs of the island. It's almost being mimicked by Prospero here. Remember, the good student can relate the extracts to the wider play. Okay. To the solemn curfew's aids, weak masters though ye be. So he says, weak masters though ye be. Prospero is still talking about power. And where does that power reside? He hasn't entirely given it up. This is the interesting section. I have bedimmed the moontide sun. Look at all the things that Prospero's done. I have called forth the mutinous winds. Again, quite a few of you talked about personification here of the winds being mutinous. The idea that Prospero must, like humans, he must control nature. Okay? And it reminds us of the mutinous men. And between the green sea and the azured vault, between the sun and the sea, the sky and the sea, he is set roaring war. So we've got thunder, mutinous winds, roaring war. We've got nature as violent. This reminds us of the tempest at the beginning. What Prospero can do. Prospero's power is violent and powerful. He's almost given a valediction to his power here. Okay? To the dread rattling thunder have I given fire, and rifted Jove's stout oak. I have given fire is an allusion, a classical allusion, perhaps to Prometheus, who gave fire from the gods, the secret of fire, to man. Okay? And for that he was punished, for giving this magical ability to mankind. And in the same way, Mary Shelley talks about Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus, the subtitle of Frankenstein. Frankenstein tries to be godlike and is punished for it. And Prospero is doing the same. He says, look what I've done. I have rifted Jove's stout oak. Okay. So how many gods have we had mentioned? We've had Neptune in the previous page. We have had Jove, the Roman god, pagan gods, if you like. It's not a Christian world here. What's being emphasized in this speech is how Prospero has moved away from the Christian world through his magic. He's become godlike, and he's rifted Jove's stout oak with his own bolt. So he's controlled nature. He's been godlike. So godlike that he has made the promontory, I can never say that word, have I made shake. A promontory is like an outlet, a bit of land that stretches out into the sea. He's made the earth shake, and he has made the spurs plucked up the pine and cedar. Again, lots of metaphor about his power. With his spurs, he's plucked up the pine and cedar. Right, okay. He's speaking in verse, which is powerful. This is status, if you like. Graves at my command have waked the sleepers. Again, graves at his command. Again, he's personifying graves. He's personifying the fact that he has life over death. Well done to the people who could see this as blasphemy. Okay, just as it's blasphemy for Frankenstein. He's wakened the sleepers. Again, he's trying to be like Jesus, raising the dead, if you like, and let forth by my so potent art, okay, my powerful art. It's interesting, he sees it as art. And this is where we see the change. And well done, Anna Louise, for talking about this. And Leah, and Shivan, and the idea of rough magic, perhaps. Okay, he goes from potent art, something art, you're an artist, you know, it's an ability to be admired. But then he calls it but this rough magic. So I suppose the word but, what do we call the word but, Jay? a conjunction, subordinating conjunction, but it's a conditional as well. It's a conditional, but this rough magic, I hear abjure. So he's making a declarative here. Who's he appealing to, Rebecca? Who's he talking to? It's a soliloquy. Maybe he's talking to himself. Maybe he's declaring it to the audience. Maybe he's declaring it to the elves and the fairies of the forest. This rough magic, I hear abjure. This is important because the rough magic is about restoration of identity. This is the restoration of to being a man. From a demigod to a man, he must give up this magic, as he does. And the adjective is rough. He acknowledges that it's rough. Well done to the people who now start to see religious connotations coming back into the language, the dramatic effects of the language. So we have I need some heavenly music, which even now I do to work mine end upon their senses, that this airy charm is for. So in order to do this, he needs faith, he needs religion. In order to do this. Well done to the people who talked about the use of caesura. I'll break my staff, bury it, fathoms in the earth. Okay, he doesn't just say, I'll give up magic, he gives us a triplet. He's using rhetorical techniques. Why is he using rhetorical techniques? Who's he trying to persuade? To convince himself. Wonderful. He's trying to persuade himself, this is what I must do. I must bury, verb. I must break my staff. I must bury it deeper than did ever plummet sound. Okay? Is that a simile? Deeper than something is a simile. Okay? It can also be a superlative. I'm not just going to bury it, I must bury something deeper than did ever plummet sound. Okay, reminds us what's underground to the Elizabethan Jacobean audience. It's hell, perhaps. Again, so we've got the juxtaposition of hell, heavenly music, the restoration of order. And then we have a strange 5 lines. He's speaking in verse all this time. But look at where we've got all of these hesitations, these dashes and pauses. This is not easy for Prospero. Caesura. Caesura. Change doesn't come easy for people. But in the end, he finishes on 5 words. It's not verse at all. Well done, Liv, for highlighting how there's a change in verse here. And again, the impact is on, this is his declaration, and therefore he's broken his own verse. I'll drown my book. And he's not just saying, I'm going to throw it in the water, I'll drown it. It's personified. And a number of you made that point about that verb. The verb to drown something is personifying an inanimate object because it has such power over him. Maya, I think you mentioned that as well. It's almost powerful as a person. So, what we've look at how much has been highlighted. You kind of are expected, you kind of have to talk about things briefly and concisely. We've talked about how the passage starts with him in power, the triplets of abeyance, of imperatives, of magic in order, and then we end on burying this, of breaking magic, of burying it deeper in the earth. And he's making his statement, I'm going to be a changed person. This man has changed because of Ariel has managed to change him. Both characters use rhetoric as a form of persuasion, to persuade the other, but also to persuade oneself. Okay. I think that takes us to the end of that extract. There's probably other things that we could have talked about, but that gives you an idea of close analysis now, okay? All right, then. That's the end of that.